One of the most important pieces on the moral state of the world today is in the great City Journal. Piece by a woman I wish I had been familiar with earlier. We'll have to have her on. Juliana Giran Pilon. Immoral equivalence. Do you know that this has been the single most consistent, I think the most consistent message of my life, along with the consequences of secularism? And it has been the notion of moral equivalence. I had this at Columbia when I was a graduate student, where constantly the United States and the Soviet Union were morally equated. The Cold War was not between liberty and tyranny, according to vast numbers of intellectuals, which gives you an idea of how long ago the moral rot had begun in academia. The battle was not between liberty and tyranny. If you spoke that way, you were considered, perhaps an American chauvinist. No, that was not the battle. The battle was between two superpowers. Or as the imagery I always heard was, two scorpions in a bottle. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics and the United States of America. And that was the world in which I lived. It has not changed. We are now witnessing it, as this writer points out, in the Middle East. I'll read to you, for example. True to form, the mainstream media in the West covered the attacks with soulless rhetoric. The New York Times, for example, refused to apply the word terrorists to the murderers. By the way, she does not make the point, but it is worthy of being made. The monsters who went into homes and shot the parents, in some cases the grandparents and the grandchildren and the children of, in most cases, just the children, the grandparents may not have been present, but grandparents were murdered. So they would murder entire families, point blank range. They're not terrorists. But right-wingers in America, those January 6th people who entered the Capitol, that's domestic terrorism. The left is morally bankrupt, but the tragedy is it spreads its moral blindness to the rest of the world. And people accept it because anything repeated enough is believed by many people. So yes, we're filled with domestic terrorists, namely right-wingers. But Hamas, they're militants. Why didn't they just say militants? Militants entered the Capitol on January 6th. Unarmed, I might add. Hurt nobody, I might add. One of them got murdered or killed, depending on which verb you wish to use. But nobody else. But those are domestic terrorists. Doesn't matter whether you agree with January 6th. It matters what language you're using. That's what I'm talking about. The New York Times refused to apply the word terrorist to the murderers, even as images of the atrocities flooded social media. The Washington Post, PBS, NPR, and Reuters all opted for the far milder militants. Militant. I don't even know what the word means. Is a militant one who engages in military action? Is it just a fierce individual? You know what I think I'll do? Live, I will define. Let's see, define militant. And the answer is, let's see, combative and aggressive in support of a political or social cause. That's it. Now I know what Hamas is. They're combative and aggressive in support of a political or social cause. The social cause is genocide. They admit it. They want to wipe out every Jew. Militant. I didn't even realize it was this, uh, how shall I put it? Minimal militant. Oh my God. But they wouldn't apply the word to the January 6th people. They're not militants. They're terrorists. They're insurrectionists. An antiseptic moral equivalence infuses mainstream media coverage in the West. Reports routinely take pains to emphasize that there are victims on both sides. See, I always point out, was this done in World War II? Well, it's true Germany is running death camps, but look at all the Germans that are being killed in Dresden and elsewhere. The reporting then had a greater moral clarity. And there are those who later went on to say that Dresden was completely immoral. Then, okay, that's still not a moral equivalence between the Allies and the Nazis. You can say that was not a tactic worth doing. I do believe Hiroshima was morally defensible, given the fact that Japan had started the war and the way the Japanese treated the Chinese and the Filipinos and the Koreans and other Asians. They treated them, only the numbers differed. Numbers are important, but they treated them in ways similar to the way the Nazis treated captive peoples. They did medical experiments. They had entire units of the Japanese army doing medical experiments on live Chinese people without anesthetic. They would cut them open. And yet there are really, 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 really foolish people who still believe people are basically good. For those people, there is no amount of cruelty, sadism, and evil on earth that would change their minds. One of the realizations I've come to in my long life is that most people, thank God not all, most people believe what they want to believe. The age of reason spawned almost no commitment to reason. That's an irony. My view of the only achievable good on earth is a combination of the God of the Bible and reason. The God of the Bible without reason leads to fanaticism. Reason without God leads to men give birth. Here is hours after the invasion, PBS's NewsHour announced in an unprecedented surprise attack, the militant Hamas rulers of Gaza, that's it, they're combative on behalf of their political cause. That's it, that's what they are. I guess Nazi militants would now be appropriate too. If militant is the description of Hamas, militant should be the description of the Nazis in World War II. The rulers of Gaza sent dozens of fighters, but they didn't fight anybody. They only slaughtered people. Even that isn't accurate. There were no fights. There was massacre. It's like saying Timothy McVeigh fought in Oklahoma City. He didn't fight. He blew up 160, whatever the number is, people. He was a militant too. Yeah, fighter on behalf of his cause. Well, one can say at least this with regard to the events of this past Saturday. It is providing more moral clarity. Black Lives Matter saluted Hamas. When I've called Black Lives Matter a despicable, racist organization, I've been called a racist for doing so. But I was morally right.